Welcome to my channel, El Paso Knives. So this is kind of a pre-video to the video, and I just want to give you just a little bit of heads up that the audio was absolutely terrible in the video when I started to craft this knife. This is the Mescalero Dawn. It was completed in the video. However, the audio was less than stellar, so please bear with it. I cleaned it up as much as I could during editing, and I think it's still viewable, and the video's not too terrible. So, please join along and see how I complete this build. Welcome to El Paso Knives. Today we're going to be working on a Bowie knife for a customer that goes by the name of Murph. Murph ordered a Mescalero style Bowie knife. I've made this knife multiple times in the past and is one of my favorite designs. It was perhaps the second knife I ever designed. So unfortunately, we're going to skip straight to the knife, which has already been profiled, grinded, and heat treated and quenched. So the knife is properly tempered. It's in the final profile. So the reason why we're not filming the beginning build of this blade is because my camera operator failed to properly turn the camera on. And so since that's happened, I fired the son of a bitch, and but I've rehired him. So he's back, and we're going to complete the knife blade. So unfortunately, without a operator, well, we don't have a knife maker. We don't have a knife maker. We don't have a camera operator. So here we are. Sorry, folks, but we're going to get straight to finishing this blade, and we'll finish it from this point all the way to finish. Please join me. Before we start our build, I'm going to just kind of give you a quick overview of the Mescalero knife. So this is the original drawing of the first version that I made of this particular blade. It had a 4 3/4 inch blade with about a 4 1/4 inch handle. It had an exposed pommel, so you can crush, break, or basically use the butt end of the knife as a tool. It had two brass pins, a lanyard hole, and then I had also put some tribal designs into the wood. And I want to say the very first blade was made out of walnut. Beautiful looking knife, and it did very well for me out in the wilderness, and kept it for my own personal collection, but since gave it to one of my uncles in Fort Worth, Texas. So the original knife had a sheath that was very, classic in nature. It was a pancake style sheath made out of all vegetable tan leather with a big belt loop, and then it had copper rivets along with stitching to secure the knife. Inside, I'd actually put Kydex just to give it a little bit of extra reinforcement and to securely hold the blade. It worked well, but I don't think the Kydex was necessary. It was probably a little bit overkill, and I don't know that I would do that again. But overall, this knife sheath combo has done very well. This sheath can also be done in a fold over as well, especially if you want to put a horizontal carry or cross carry type loop onto the sheath. It'll work much better than the sheath over here to the right. So that's the Mescalero Dawn was the full name of this knife when I first designed it, and it is a Bowie style knife with it's kind of a drop point, but I've done this style of knife with clip points, and so I still see it as a Bowie style knife. And this particular design can be made into a longer blade or even a shorter blade, which is what we're going to do today. So instead of a 4 3/4 inch blade,
we're going to make a 4-inch version as the customer requested. So here's the Mescalero blade that was made earlier, and so we ended up with a 4-inch cutting edge 4-inch blade, and it's got a nice drop point, 1/8 inch spine, and it is made out of 1095 high carbon steel. You can see the temper on it, nice colors, blues and wheats. So you've got real nice, hard, springy steel in this particular blade. So what needs to happen next is we've got the bevel already placed. So we've got to finish and grind this bevel so it's nice and clean, get rid of some of these grit lines, hand sand above, and get it so it has a nice finish on it, so that we're making something that's a good product for the customer. So I'm going to take some 120 grit sandpaper and just start sanding the handles. Some of you may have asked why I put oil onto the blade. So I just put drops just to help keep the sandpaper as clean as possible, help get rid of and break up some of the carbon and residue, and just makes for better sanding. So another technique I like using is I'll clamp the blade to basically a clamp, and I'll do that right along the handle portion. That way I've got the knife blade portion of the knife open to me, and just makes it easier, especially to get things nice and flat. So right now I'm sanding horizontally with the blade, basically. So actually what I'm doing right now is I'm sanding parallel to the blade, and then I'm going to switch it up and start sanding perpendicular to the blade. And what that's going to do is give us a cross section of of sanding, so it'll help give it a nice smooth finish. Okay, let's wipe it down and see how it looks. Still using 120 grit. Just did multiple passes. You can see how all the grind lines are not as harsh as you see down here on the actual bevel itself, on the grind. So I'm going to take this to the belt sander to get rid of these. But here above the grind, along the spine, center of the blade and up, I wanted to get all the scratches, all the sanding, all going parallel with the blade. And so it just gives it a nice aesthetic. And once we get the big grind marks out, blade will be looking much better. Let me flip it around so you can see what it looks like before sanding. So that's what it looked like more or less before sanding, after sanding. And we can certainly go to a higher grit to get it even smoother, and you can get all the way to the point where you get a mirror finish. But mirror finish isn't too much of not very popular for most knife makers. Most blades you'll see will be a soft. So I go for either a satin look or a patina, or a combination of the two. Okay, so we finished sanding both sides. Now it's on to grinding the bevel so we can get these grind lines out. Okay, so we've got the blade all nice, finished in terms of initial sanding, grinding. And so now we're going to patina the blade. And during that moment, somewhere in between, my arm caught something, and I think I'm bleeding from right in there. Well, I guess if you ain't bleeding, you ain't working. We finished the patina. You can see the salts are starting to react. See some of the browns. That's more or less where you're forcing the rust onto the blade. That's going to help form that patina onto the blade itself, giving it a really nice aged look, and also protection against rust when we do expose it to moisture during use. So we're just going to let that for a little bit, and then we'll clean off the blade. Okay, this is after a few minutes time. You can see the reaction occurring. So now what I'll do is I'll go dunk this and wash it off with fresh water, and then We'll clean it up with a real soft abrasive, probably some fine steel wool, and that'll give us our completed, finished patina on the blade. So I just rinsed it off. You can see how the patina came out. It's a little glossy. That's just the water. Dry it up here. There you go. Let's see how much you can see here. Now what I'll do is I'll clean it up with some fine wool. And so I think I want to darken this up just a little bit more. So I'm going to give it one more pass, focusing particularly along the spine. I'm going to reapply one more coat of my solution. Right, I think we're done with the patina. We'll rinse it off after we let it set for a few minutes. Okay, I've rinsed it off, dried it off. Using steel wool, go over it one more time. Just nice and soft. And what we're doing with the steel wool is just making sure that get any crust, any residue off. Okay, I think I got it where I want it. Let's see if you can see this in the light here. Next step with the blade, now that we've got the patina onto it, is we're going to go ahead and craft our handles, our scales. And for this particular knife, we're going to put curly maple. And that curly maple is essentially going to cover this area of the blade. We're going to put three 3/16 inch brass rods to hold the scale. And then we've got a lanyard hole right here. So right here we got some great looking curly maple that we're going to make our scales with. And so I'm going to go ahead and do the tracing. I leave a little bit of an overlap of wood when I'm doing this, just so that we make sure there's enough coverage when we go to grinding and finishing the handles. So I'm tracing. And I'm essentially starting the scale right at the flat portion of the handle, right before we get to the finger guard. So I just flip my blade over, line everything up, and I trace. Now we've got both our scales. It's time to cut them out. Okay, we've got our scales completed in terms of getting cut out. And it's just a rough cut because once we fix them onto the blade, we get them mounted, we can sand them and do the detail work on them. This next step, I'm going to take the front edge of our scale and I'm just going to gently sand it down just to make sure we have a smooth edge. You could probably kind of see that there. Let's do the next one. I'm going to start our glue up here. Put a generous amount of glue, a personal preference, and I'm not sponsored by this company by any means. I'd be more than happy to take their glue, but it's a Gorilla. It's just Gorilla Super Glue. Works really well. Dries fast and dries hard as a nail. Make sure my front is aligned. And this glue sets really, really fast. Make sure I've got coverage all around. Press down on it. Shift it back just a notch. Now I'm just going to clamp it down. Just make sure you got a nice fit seal on both your ends. And then I'll generally put one right in the center. So our glue has set. Time to remove the clamps. We're going to go ahead and drill our holes for our mounting hardware. And this is 3/16 of an inch. Now I just got to change out the bit. So changed out the bit to 13/64. And so this is for a lanyard. Nice and easy. And there we go. We've got all our holes in place. So now it's time to glue on our second gel and repeat the process. When mounting scales, make sure the front ends meet or align. Otherwise, you're going to be forced to cut or sand to get them even, and you stand a good chance of putting a scratch or damaging the blade after, post patina finish. You definitely don't want that. So I'm going to place some clamps on it. And we'll let that set. All right, glue is set. Now we're just going to drill right through our previous holes. So this is the lanyard bit. Now we'll switch over to the 3/16. Okay, time to mount our hardware. Local hammer. Take our 3/16 rod. And we're through with a little excess. Now with this 3/16, I don't use my lineman pliers. I actually use bolt cutters. All the way through. Okay, through. See, I leave a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch on each end, and I'll grind the rest off, and then I begin to grind the scale to shape. Let's go do that. So I wanted to stop here, kind of a teaching point. So as I was grinding, one of my pins is still a little loose. It's basically sliding back and forth as I'm grinding. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to pin this on the anvil so that this brass spreads a little bit, just enough so that it catches and isn't sliding around. Okay, so I'm just taking a ball peen hammer. I'm just going to lay this and just gently. You don't want to hit it so hard that you scale. So And this is a okay. I think we're good. So there's the blade before we hand sand. And I'm just going to start off with 120 grit. Jump in the finer grit sandpaper here. What's next is I'm going to use a torch to just very briefly fire lick the scales, make sure we can get those tannins to come through. So here I'm going to take some Feelings tan saddle brown dye. I'm just going to use a little bit. It's about all you need right here. It's like blood almost. And I'm just going to wipe the wood. It's going to give it a reddish yellow tone. It's going to pull the flames in that curly maple, the tiger striping. kind of enhance it. The wood is just soaking up the dye. And because our wood is dry, and we just fire licked it with the torch to build that kind of that dark, deep contrast so we can see the curly maple and the tiger stripes in detail. Now we're going to rehydrate the wood, and we're going to use boiled linseed oil for that. We're going to wipe on that boiled linseed oil. And this is a nice hydration for the wood. I mean, the wood just sucks it in like a sponge, but it also gives it a nice kind of semi-gloss satin sheen to it. And you can just see how the highlights contrast in the different tones and colors of the wood grain. Let that soak just a little bit, and we'll reapply. So here I'm just going to take some steel wool and just gently go over the wood. This is going to smooth out any anything we might have on the scales. So here I'm just using steel wool to go over the scales. Give it a nice little touch up, smoothing out any rough spots without really taking any wood off. And give it a real nice soft feel to the wood.
So our scales have dried after putting the boiled linseed oil. They've penetrated the wood and should help to preserve it. What we're going to do now is make the leather sheath. So we'll transition to that. So we're taking an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. We're going to fold it in half to design our sheath and place our knife along the inside crease. And we're going to try to have about, I'm going to say about 1/2 inch all around. So we're going to trace around. And there's our tracing. I'm going to design our sheath. Stand up. There's our template. So I try to minimize waste on the leather. So I try to use as much as I can. Just making sure there's nothing wrong with the leather underneath. Just trace with a pencil. And What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to extend the belt loop a little longer. This is a little too short, and it's really because of the length of the paper, so I'm just going to shift this up about an inch. Okay, now we're going to do our fine trimming. Okay, we've got it cut out, and now we're going to go ahead and trim the edges. I'm going to use a little skiving tool. Okay, after I skive, I like using just a piece of sandpaper, and I go over the edges. Alright, so we've got nice clean edges. Got nice clean edges, and we're ready to move on to the next step. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to groove it for the stitching, and then we're going to dye it. Also got to trim the belt loop. Start with the belt loop. I just take a little tin lid, trace my little sitting in there. Yeah. Smooth edge. Okay, we'll groove next. And what the grooving does is it helps tuck away the stitching. Gives it a nice clean look, and it also serves as a good guide for hand stitching as well, so you stay in a nice straight line, or at least you have a nice track to follow. So now we're going to punch our hole for our belt loop. Got our little jeweler's anvil punch. Just going to take a hammer. We punched all the way through. So to make our welt, just take a scrap leftover remnant of leather. So any piece of leather larger than 1 by 1 I keep, because it'll come in handy. So in this case, I just overlay the sheath. And I'm going to trace about a 1/2 inch welt. First by tracing the outline, and then I'm moving it forward to create about a 1/2 inch spacing, and then I'm going to trace it again. And there's our welt. Now we just cut it out. Welt, it'll lie just in there, just like that. Fold it over, and we're going to want a drain hole at the bottom, so you've got to make sure that you leave a little bit of space there. So in this case, I got to trim the end. That gives it just enough to be able to drain out, should it ever get wet. So, okay, time to dye. And I'm going to use dark brown on this. Okay, we're going to let it dry. Now that the sheath is somewhat dry, I'm going to go ahead and stamp this sheath. I've got a little stamp that says handmade on it, just a little touch. And we'll see if you can see that, bring that up in the camera there a little bit. So, okay, time to put our mounting hardware for the belt loop. Set our copper rivet. It's nice and set. Now we'll trim the excess. Smooth, no sharp jagged edges, and we're good there. I'm going to take my little crabbing tool here. I'm going to start laying the holes, my stitching holes, right down the grooves that we put in earlier. And you're not trying to go through the leather, you're just making indentions so we can go in there and complete the holes using other tools. But this makes sure that we have even spacing on each of our stitches. They're straight, they're following a pattern. Actually, this side, we actually don't need to do this side because we're going to end up drilling through, so it's going to come through the opposite side anyway, so yeah. Time to drill our holes. So I've set my 2x6, and we've got our leather here. We've completed all of our holes for our track, for our stitching track. Now I'm going to take my Dremel with a small bit. I'm going to go over each hole, okay, to drill through the leather and to stitch it. But before we do that, we have got to put our welt on. So we're going to do that glue up here. And for the glue up, I like using this Aleene's leather and suede glue. It dries fast and holds well. So I'm just going to put a bead. Then I'm just going to make Make sure it lines up on the edges. Press and hold for a little while. If you get some glue spillage, just wipe off the excess. You want to try to minimize the amount of glue you get on the actual facing side of the sheath. If you do happen to get some, you can use a little bit of acetone. Lightly rub it off. You may have to re-dye some areas, but it does happen. Okay, I think it's taken hold. Now we're gonna do the smooth side. Fold over. And we are going to clamp as well, so try to line everything up. Now let it set for a few minutes, let it dry and adhere, and then we'll come back. We'll start drilling, put our stitching holes in. Now the customer, Murph, he wants a horizontal carry ability with the sheath. So I'm going to design a loop that goes around, and it's going to get stitched into the sheath, and he'll have that ability to carry it horizontally should he choose to do so. So while our sheath is drying, I've taken an 8.5 piece of paper and I've drawn a line across at 2 3/4 length all the way across the sheet of paper. What this is going to serve as is our horizontal belt loop. Now for your horizontal belt loop, you're going to want to use thinner leather. I want to say this is like 1/2 ounce. It's got a suede feel to it, rough leather, but it's thin. It's very flexible, but it's very strong. So I don't recommend using a thick piece of leather for your belt loop. Otherwise, you get this bulky, loop that sticks out, and in my line of business, lighters was always better, and trying to keep a low profile is always the best course of action. So we're going to trim this 2 3/4. We're going to use thin leather, and we're going to create the belt loop. So first I'm going to cut this out. It's going to serve as a small template. I'm going to overlay the leather. I keep the straight edge, and then I'm just going to transfer that line across. Yes, you could use the sheet or the ruler, and I've done it that way too. I'm all about using templates. Okay, so we got our line. We're going to go ahead and cut. Set the excess aside. I'm going to move our block for a minute so you get an idea. This loop basically go over just like that. So yeah, we're going to have some excess, but that's good because you don't want this too tight. If you make it too tight, you won't be able to get a belt through it. So you definitely want to save some room for the belt. So I think the sheath is dry, so we're going to go ahead and remove our clamps. I'm going to trace the welt side of the sheath onto our horizontal belt loop so that we can match the edges. So let's go ahead and take these clips off. Now I'm just going to trace. Make sure we double check our placement. Now move this down just a tad. So what you don't want to do is cover your belt loop so much that, again, the user can't use it. So I think that's right on. So now I'm going to trace. I'm going to trim. Check for fitting. Good alignment. So what I'll do next is overlay some leather. Okay, so we got everything lined up on our edge. I've got this little template of a belt. I made it thick. Just folded a piece of leather over, and it's about 1.5 inches to simulate a belt. So I just kind of run it through. And that's going to give me the room that I need to trace and trim the belt loop so it fits properly, and the owner doesn't have a hard time or too difficult of a time initially getting his belt in. It's going to be a little snug initially because it is leather, but over time it'll loosen up a little bit. And but as you can see, there's plenty of maneuver space here to get the belt in and out. So what I'm going to do now is just leave that in place, flip it over, ensuring everything stays lined up, and then I'm going to trim or trace and then trim again. Okay, now I unroll everything, and now we trim. Now we check again for fitting. here, we're going to cant this just a little bit so we don't have a big bulge at the bottom. And that's just a matter of just canting it just slightly. Just like that. And in fact, we can even trim some of this, kind of taper it up. It'll look real nice. So that's what we're going to do. So I folded our horizontal belt sheath in half, matched it up, and I'm just going to do this all by eye. And I'm just going to cut a shape into it, kind of a half moon or a slight oval there. I'm going to do the same to the top, just slightly. Okay, check it. Line everything back up, and it just gives it a little bit more of a custom look to it by having these shapes. And then you can just trim to taste, which I'm going to do here. I'm going to cut a little bit of this off here. Just give it a little bit more of a curve there at the top. A little bit of excess here, so I'm going to trim ever so slightly here. Check again. And there we go. So we've got a built-in belt loop. Should I say integrated belt loop? And I left a little excess so we can fit as necessary. So now we're going to glue and clamp yet again. We're going to do our stitching tracks once that's completed, and then we'll drill everything, and then we'll hand stitch the sheath together. Taking our leather glue, putting them out here on the edges. Line it up. I want this to at least adhere a little bit before I do the other side, so I don't have leather sliding all over the place. Clamp this. Let it sit for a little bit to dry. It's all dried up, so we'll unclamp and we'll do the opposite side. everything lined up. Clamps. Wipe off some of the excess. And again, let dry. Okay. Should be dry. We'll unclamp. Put our holes in there, so I just go to the previous hole below it. Okay, so we've got our stitch line. Up here I'm going to do a square near the mouth so that it is reinforced. You'll see what that looks like once it's all finished. There's a square, stitch line. Now we drill. So I've got a generous amount of thread here. It's artificial sinew in black. And I'm going to feed the ends into each one of my needles to do a saddle stitch. There's one. And there's two. And again, you want to leave plenty of tail on the open end. Get needle in each hand. And we'll start our saddle stitching technique. So I don't need this anymore. And I'm going to start at the bottom of the sheath, feed a needle through. Pull it all the way through, make sure our two needles are even, and I'm going to pull the thread until it's all the slack's taken up and we've got even length on each side of our needles, so they're equal in length. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a needle, it doesn't matter which one, but you take the needle on whatever side it's on, you're going to go to the hole, above it. Pull it all the way through, lay it aside, grab your second needle, side it's on, and go right into the hole above it. Pull all the way through. So now you've got sinew on each side, give it a tug, and repeat. technique I use is I'll actually will do about 3 holes before I switch to the opposite needle. It's just a faster technique for me. See, I've got two threads built. That's where I'll stop, set it aside, grab my second needle, go into the hole above it, and continue. Once I've got an equal amount of stitches, again we're on opposing sides, I give it a tug, tighten up my stitches. And so your pattern should be the same on the front as it is in the back. Nice and clean and looking the same. So we'll keep going. Gotten to the end of the stitch here. This is where I made the square. And the square sits towards the mouth, right on the welt. And what it does is just reinforces the welt at the mouth, which is going to receive all the stress from the knife coming in and out. So that's what I do to reinforce. Is I'll make 4 holes at the top, depending on the knife. Sometimes I use rivets instead of artificial sinew. When you get towards the end, it can get a little hard getting that needle fed through. Just use a pair of pliers. Now that I've completed the stitch all around, I'm gonna double back about 2 to 3 holes and end with both of my stitching thread on the back side so I can trim it and fuse it. So I just go backwards, going in reverse, terminate this end here. So just pull all the way through, take the needle off, take up all the slack, give it a nice tug so it sets, and then I'm gonna go reverse with the second needle. Because we're doubling back, it is a little bit of a challenge getting that needle through because you're overlapping the stitches. And we'll terminate this one. Pull the needle off, pull the stitching, make sure it's snug, and then grab a pair of scissors, cut it about 1/4 inch, give it a good snug, or a good pull, trim, get rid of the excess, and then I'll take a lighter fuse this. It's almost like paracord. And then I just use the big lighter to fuse it down. So we got nice stitching all around. Now what I do next is I will take a little bit of dye along with the sheath, and I'll just go over the stitching line area just to make sure that little of the natural color of the sheath is showing. I want the stitch line to be nice and dark on my stitch holes. Just like that. Let that dry for a bit. And our next step is I'm going to take this over to our grinder, and I'm going to grind the edge, make sure it's nice and flush, clean, and then we'll put an edge coat on it to seal the welt. Now we're going to place edge coat on the welt of the sheath. And you can do this with a brush or a swab, but this stuff gets pretty hard, so I just use a popsicle stick. Just put a good amount right along the edge. They do have this in brown. What it does is it seals it, gives it a nice clean look. Let that dry. So while this is drying, I'm going to take a little bit of leather dye and I'm just going to clean up the edge now that it's been rounded and smoothed. Just touching up in areas again to show some of the natural leather. Now I'm going to apply dye to the mouth. This is kind of a personal preference. Also the design of the knife. Sometimes I'll dye, sometimes I'll leave it natural. This one I'm going to darken it up. And I'm just kind of blending everything in. I'm just doing a very, very light color. Just want a nice, even look to it. And then let that dry a notch. It'll lighten up as it dries. Just buff it at this point, and I think I need a touch more dye towards the bottom of the sheath. Right here. dries pretty quick. Now we just buff it all out. So before we put on the final edge on our blade, we haven't forgot about that, have we? We're going to go ahead and check for fitting. So here's our blade. Good fit. And we could do a wet molding of it. Probably not necessary at the time, especially with the belt loop. It's got a real nice fit, not too tight, not too loose. You definitely don't want it falling out, especially if you're going to do a horizontal carry. That's part of the reason why I made the sheath as deep as it is. That way the knife is tucked away, really nice and secure. And if you leave too much handle out, you know, and if you're doing horizontal carry, you don't want it, you know, falling out inadvertently. So just a little bit of knowledge and pass on to you all that I've learned over time. So okay, so we're going to put the final edge on the knife. We're going to do our finishing touches, put our lanyard on, and she'll be done. Okay, so I've got a 120 grit belt, and I'm going to put this edge. I do it more or less by feel. I use my pointer finger on my left hand and my thumb, create a little vise, a little clamp. I get the angle that I want, so I'm looking for 30 degrees or so, and I'm just going to sweep across. Can't let heat build up on the blade, and we'll do both sides same way and just switch hands, and I'll cool the blade in between if it gets warm. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to 320 grit. Once we put the final edge on the blade, I'll take it to a leather strop, just very gently, not too much pressure. Just drop the edge, get rid of any burrs. Okay, now that we've finished strapping, we're going to go ahead and try out our best test to see how sharp this blade is. So we've got our system calibrated. Place the knife in the fulcrum. Wow, 65 grams. That's pretty freaking sharp. 65 grams. Wow. For those of you that are wondering what the 65 grams means, essentially it's the amount of force applied to this test media, and this test media is made by Bess, and so it's all Bess certified. And you know, you apply steady pressure, and then you basically, when you break the filament, it tells you how many grams of pressure it took to cut the element. And so 200 grams is the amount of pressure or force that's needed for a utility razor to cut through this filament. That's a utility, that's a razor blade, utility razor. A brand new one will take 200 grams to cut this filament. This registered at 65 just now, so this is sharp. Okay, I put the finishing touches on the Mescalero Bowie knife, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Blade looks beautiful, the scales nice, reddish browns on black, tiger stripes and that curly maple coming through. The sheath I think turned out great. So this will be heading out to the customer in the next 24 hours. So our fit on the knife is excellent, and I think it's just a beautiful looking knife and sheath combination, and it's built for horizontal carry. For those of you that may not know what that is, essentially your belt will go through this loop here, and as it can sit basically on your waist, where the knife is carried horizontally instead of vertically. And this is good for like scout carry, or if you want to carry it on either hip or towards the buckle for concealment, or you know, practical purposes. And you can essentially it's ambidextrous, so you can put the belt through the front or through the back, your preference. So and it's got a belt loop for traditional horizontal carry. So yeah, I think it came out great. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the blade. Had some hiccups with the audio, but hey, we push on, we press on, and we get it done. So let me know your thoughts. I appreciate you tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and share with others. Let's grow that viewership, and I've got more in store in terms of videos, and I'm going to change it up frequently so that I offer a variety of video that's both instructional, entertaining, and you know, and of value to my fan base. So again, thank you for joining. Take care. God bless.